Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. Um, uh, I don't think this will necessarily be a very long meeting, but we'll see. Um, let's start with introductions. I'm Paul Vinsel. I'm the chair of the governance committee and a physician member of the Recovery Council. And I want to welcome all of you and the public, anyone who might be listening to the governance committee meeting on May 22nd, 2026 at 11 a.m. And Pat, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Pat Kimmel. I'm the chair of the Maine Recovery Council. And I just want to tell you in advance, I have to get off the phone. I have to get off the Zoom about 5 minutes before 12.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Maggie?
Got me just as I was getting my afternoon yawn. I'm Maggie McLaughlin. I'm a member of the Maine Recovery Council representing litigating subdivisions.
It's still morning, Maggie, so you can have another yawn in the afternoon. Thank you. Tess?
Hey everyone, I'm Tess Parks. I'm a person with lived experience of substance use disorder, and I'm the vice chair of the Maine Recovery Council.
Thank you. Chastity?
Hi everyone, Chastity Toole, the Executive Director of the Maine Recovery Council.
Thank you. Joe?
Good morning, everyone. Joe Everett, a member of the Recovery Council and the chair of the Program and Grants Committee.
Thank you. Jamar?
Good morning, everyone. Jamar Williams, member of the MRC, representing prison reentry.
Thank you. Jamar, that walkway behind you usually breaks in the movies, so I want you to be careful there, okay?
All right, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna be very careful with that one.
Elizabeth?
Hello, I am Elizabeth Fortier. I am the coordinator for the Maine Recovery Council.
Thank you. Deborah?
That was quick. Hi, I'm Deb Poulin. I am a member of the Maine Recovery Council. I serve as the treasurer, and I am the acting deputy director with the Office of Behavioral Health.
Thank you. Brendan?
Hi, I'm Brendan O'Neill. I'm with the Attorney General's office. I would prefer to keep my camera off today because I was on a flight that arrived at 2:30 in the morning, and I'm metabolically not fit to be seen. That may not be medically accurate, but that's how I'm feeling.
Well, we'll let it go. That sounds good, Brendan. Thank you. So the agenda that came out, Elizabeth was good enough to put that together because usually this meeting is 2 weeks after the Maine Recovery Council meeting, and that's when I make the agenda after that meeting. But because of the way the days came in this month, it's only a week after. So Elizabeth put it together when I wasn't ready for it yet. And it turns out there's probably the thing that we're going to talk about the most is a addition to the recovery count to the agenda. And that is that because of a recent court case, Brendan is recommending that we make some changes to the procedure for public comment at monthly meetings of the Maine Recovery Council. And he sent Elizabeth and Chastity sent out some information on that. They sent out the court decision, which I didn't read in total, but I read some of it. And I did see some videotapes of the meeting itself that was in question at the Augusta School Board, and then I read the article from the Press Herald. Before we go on, Betsy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning from Washington County, Betsy Fitzgerald, representing the litigating subdivisions.
Thank you. So Brendan, would you like to introduce this subject and give us a little history and your recommendations?
Sure, thanks, Paul. And I'll try to keep it brief. The bottom line is, there was a Maine federal court, a trial court that, reached a decision about the public comment policy of the Augusta School Board. and struck down parts of it as violating the First Amendment, and did not strike down other parts of it. Um, there's a couple of important qualifiers about all that. First is the Recovery Council is not the Augusta School Board, so the court's order doesn't explicitly apply to the Recovery Council. The second qualifier is that the Augusta School Board, and I, probably could do a little work to confirm this, still has the option to appeal this decision. So the decision was made at the lowest federal court level, at the trial court. The school board, I think, still has the option to appeal it if it chooses. And if it does appeal it, you never know what the appellate court would do with the lower court's decision. It could overturn it, it could ratify it, it could make some changes. Um, so with all that, so all that basically says that this is a recent Maine federal court decision that informs what boards that are public boards that have public comment policies might consider or should consider, as you put together your policies. Um, the what I'm recommending is at this time that the council make some changes on an interim basis until my office has a little more time to come up with a more firm recommendation about whether or not the public comment policy, should be adjusted to reflect the, findings of the court in this other circumstance. So at this point, this is more of a sort of protective recommendation to say, until, my office has had a chance to provide a more certain recommendation, it's my recommendation that in the meantime, the council, you know, uh, either, formally adopt a policy change in the interim, or at least not attempt to enforce its current policy regarding, some of the edits that I have provided in the draft revision. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions or anything I need to clarify.
Any,
I guess,
I thought, Brendan, I thought that
Betsy,
your,
I think Betsy had.
oh, Betsy,
that's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
I thought that your edits of the policy or procedure that we have were very measured, and given the results of the court case, I think they're very reasonable. Go ahead, Betsy.
I don't disagree, Paul. The only thing that I guess kind of I think about is that if we start making changes now and then we make more changes later, it serves to confuse. And if we kind of wait until the recommendations are there, we make the changes once and it's not as confusing. That's my only concern. I'm not disagreeing with anything suggested, it's just the process.
You would prefer that we wait till the Attorney General's office itself has made a recommendation for public comments at
I
public
think it would be
meetings?
cleaner, but that's just me.
Mhm.
And Paul and Betsy, that would be totally fine. And as I said a minute ago, in the event that that's what the council wants to do, it's my recommendation that even if you don't make any changes, you don't attempt to enforce the current policy as written. Taking into account the changes, the edits that I provide in this interim document. Does that make sense, Betsy? Yeah.
Pat, do you think you would be able to do that? to allow public comment, but not enforce parts of our policy.
So I think part of it is a little odd for me. I mean, it's minor changes, but can I ask Brendan? Most of it has to do with. Can you explain just a little bit why you chose those two sentences to take out?
Yes. um, the crux of it comes down to whether on regarding the First Amendment, whether speech is being controlled in a way that the public can have advance notice of what exactly it is being regulated. And part of the problem with the language that I've edited in the policy, and this is an issue that the Augusta School Board had, the court found that certain parts of it were too vague. Um, and the vagueness really comes down to the idea that whoever the presiding officer is, could be Pat, could be Tess in her vice chair role, could be somebody else who's sitting in the role of policing public comment, um, would have a certain amount of discretion to be able to determine what it means for speech to be respectful. Um, and what's respectable for Pat could be different for what it is for Tess, could be different for what it is for me. And similarly, regarding the language around foul language, the court's decision specifically goes into an analysis of like what's vulgar language, what's obscene language, and generally, gets into some of the history of the First Amendment around um, the idea that citizens of the country being able to criticize their leaders in the language that they use, as opposed to like being required to use the language of those in power. Those are problematic considerations. So for here with this policy, just speaking specifically about this, trying to police what um, general disrespectful language is complicated. I may not think that somebody is speaking disrespectfully, but you might. Um, the whether certain language is foul or not foul, again, is gets into some discretion on the part of the presiding officer. The first sentence, public comments should be respectful of all people and groups involved. Just to be candid, I may ultimately come back with a recommendation that that language is fine, mostly because it's sort of like guidance. It's not mandatory. By using the word should be, like we're saying, we would prefer that people speak respectfully. But I would recommend against trying to have a provision that allows you to enforce that and say, you got to stop talking because I think you're being disrespectful. And maybe there's a different way to say those things. And that's why I've added some of the additional language, which I, copied from the court's order. And again, this is a trial court, which means it's the sort of first court that parties go to, and there could be other courts that override what this court says. So the fact that I've included these things doesn't make them bulletproof. It could be that a later court says, those things are also not okay, or different language would be okay. But for now, we're getting a little more specific by saying that, someone's engaging in harassment or racial epithets or actual disruption. And again, those are examples that came directly from the court's order as being upheld in other court cases.
And then Brendan, in regards to having your office review this, do you have a time frame on more changes to come?
It's definitely going to be within the next 2 months. My intent is that it would cover basically the next two full council meetings. It might even be sooner than that, but it would not be, I think, later than that. And I don't anticipate um, like other changes. I think my office would be essentially looking at changes that look a lot like this. This paragraph is the only one that I anticipate us, taking a hard look at in terms of its, compliance with what we now have is another teaching on the First Amendment.
So here's my thought, and then I'll stop. My thought is, I certainly, if I am the person doing this at the meeting, I don't have any problem following these guidelines without the changes. But I think if the changes are going to come within the next 60 or so days, that instead of changing it now and then changing it later, I might be prone to thinking, let's wait and and for the final change and then to go for a vote.
Thank you, Pat. Maggie?
Brendan may be able to speak more to this, but it sounds like we either don't enforce provisions at all or we adopt this interim language. And I guess I don't want to be in a place where we're not enforcing provisions, because I've been in public meetings, they're very much targeted for this kind of engagement. I wonder if another avenue that's available to us is simply for the next two meetings, because it may only be one meeting even, we simply don't have public comment because we haven't had people calling in for public comment for the last several meetings. And we could still accept written public comment, and we still will have public comment coming up sooner after that. But that would create a space by which we can manage this uncertainty without having to either enforce everything or not enforce anything.
Thank you, Maggie. I was thinking a similar, not what your remedy is, but I was thinking the same problem that if we uh, have certain parts of this that we're not going to enforce, I think that could be messy of what we do enforce. Um, I also was interested when I read the court findings and read parts of the policy that the Augusta City Council has on it. They had a lot of provisions that we don't have, and it seemed to be like you could not spread rumor. You could not introduce rumor into the meeting. You could not make any accusations against certain people, which we don't have. We've never had to face any of that, but so I thought it was kind of interesting. I also watched the YouTube video of one of the meetings, and I frankly think that they stopped the speaker really when they weren't. It didn't seem that to me that they were doing anything that should have been offensive to anyone, even if I don't agree with their position. Thank you. We'll go to Tess.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Brendan, for providing this. My only concern with pausing public comment for a couple months is that I think a lot of the root of this issue is around restricting speech. And I think not having that opportunity or restricting speech in response to this to me feels escalating in a way where I would prefer that we keep the public comment period. I'm torn. I could go either way. We wait the 60 days. But I also appreciate some of the changes that Brendan makes. I think it make sure that speech isn't restricted, but it ensures that the manner in which speech is delivered, in terms of whether it's harassing, threatening, raising your voice, those are changes that I support because I'm definitely someone that really truly believes in the First Amendment as an advocate.
Thank you, Tess, very much. Pat?
Well, I was just going to ask Chastity to share whether, because I know that sometimes she has in advance, she knows if people are telling her in advance whether they're going to speak publicly. Because um, I, I have a tendency to be with Tess. I'm a little uncomfortable with pausing public comment about what perception that takes. Um, but if Chastity could talk a little bit about people requesting to use public comment and how that is, I'd appreciate that.
I mean, as you all know, we don't get a ton of requests. So for the most part, we usually know what we're going to have. I am hesitant to say to pause it. I mean, it may not matter. We may not have anyone the next 2 months, so it may not be an issue. I worry if we pause it, as word spreads that we took away public comment, then we're going to have people reaching out wanting to do public comment upset because they took it away. So I think it most likely won't be a non-issue to just continue over the next couple months. And you guys, it's not in your policy now to allow people to just show up and do it or do it on the fly. We've allowed it because we haven't had people. Your policy is people have to sign up ahead of time. So like you can stick to your policy and then you're always going to know how many you're going to have.
Thank you, Chastity and Pat. Maggie?
I really appreciate and respect the view that we don't want to suppress people's public comment. If that's the case, though, then I would prefer that we go with adopting the interim edits to avoid a circumstance where we are only enforcing some but not others, and it gets messier.
Thank you, Maggie. Brendan?
Thanks. On the earlier points, I want to point out that in the Augusta City Council, or sorry, school board case, in that case, the school board was required by state law to have a public comment period. The Recovery Council is not required to have a public comment period, and it's up to you whether, these other considerations that you've discussed, um, warrant one, making a decision one way or the other about whether to have one. The only requirement that the council has right now for public comment, I think, is in the bylaws for the public forum. The council is required under the MOU to operate with, I think the language is all reasonable transparency, and in conformity with the Freedom of Access Act. I don't know that transparency or certainly FOA does not require a public comment or, accepting public comment. Transparency doesn't, necessarily, I don't think that, I think that's more about, being open with your actions and comments rather than accepting comment from the public. And, as has already been noted, the council does make available a channel by which the public can submit public comment at all times, and at sort of an unlimited volume through the email system. So that's just some background. It doesn't weigh in one way or the other whether you should suspend the policy at this point. Oh, but except I think in order to suspend the policy, I think, and maybe Chastity could weigh in, it would have to be a council vote because I think it was adopted by the council.
Yes.
All right. So I think we have a couple of decisions to make here. And I'll really be looking for consensus in this. The first is whether people feel that we should continue with public comments uh, currently and it, for the next couple of months before the AG's office, Brendan's office, comes with a final recommendation. Tess, Pat, and I agree, feel that the public comment is opportunity is important for the public. Um, and what do other people feel about that? Do you feel we should continue it or maybe not have it for a couple months?
I think having it is fine. I'm beginning to worry that we are an accident looking for a place to happen. We haven't had an issue
Right.
with public comment. Um, why are we creating the possibility? If we let things just work the way they are, we may just be able to move this to a smooth transition in a month or two, and that's all we need to do.
Okay. Is there anyone that disagrees with that? Okay, so we will plan to continue the public comment period for the next couple of months. Thank you. And the question is, should we make some interim changes or should we wait until Brendan's office comes up with a final recommendation and just allow Pat or Tess or whoever's running the meeting and facilitating the public comment to not enforce parts of this policy?
Well, Paul, as I just said, I think if we just continue to do what we do now, it has not been a problem. I honestly don't see that it would be. We are very different from a school board. And I think we'd be okay. But that's, like I said, that's just me.
Does anyone have any
Oh,
disagreement with that?
no, but Deb has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Deb, I couldn't tell because it's over the little Maine insignia on your.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I am actually in agreement with Betsy. I was going to frame it a little bit differently. Not speaking from a legal lens, speaking only from a layperson lens, when I look at the changes to the policy, they're nuanced and I get them and I understand them and I understand them much more because Brendan shared his interpretation. But if I were strictly looking at this on my own, I would say that the spirit of the policy is the same. The specificity is different, but the spirit is the same. And so, in my mind, and feel free to push back on me, all of you, but in my mind, I'm thinking from just a Joe citizen frame of mind. If somebody were to give public comment to the MRC, that did fall into any of those categories, common sense would tell me that whoever was facilitating the meeting would say, this is starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable to me. Is there, it would be great if you could maybe lower your voice or just some sort of gentle, respectful redirection that we would do anyway, regardless of what the policy says. And so, how we choose to operate, I think it's important to have the policy. I think it's important to have the policy as accurate as possible for all of the reasons that Brendan is outlining. But I don't think that it monumentally changes how we would manage a situation if somebody were to engage in speech that we would be uncomfortable with. I'm not even going to say appropriate or not, just uncomfortable with. So I think we should just status quo until the policy changes, at which point we adopt and vote and share the final policy. That's my opinion.
There was I don't know if you'll remember the second public comment period, the public forum that we had at the college. there was a gentleman who got up and uh, wasn't, I wouldn't say threatening, but was uh, speaking loudly and pointing fingers at people that made me a little uncomfortable. Um, does anyone, yes, Maggie.
Brendan, if there was a speaker who spoke up and was using the platform for language that was harassing or racial epithets, and Pat noted those explicitly as the two reasons why she was suspending their engagement, would we be fine? Or would we be in trouble?
Um, I think you would have, I think the council would have a stronger basis to defend that against a potential retaliatory lawsuit than if Pat said, you're being disrespectful.
Okay. As long as, Pat, you feel comfortable being very specific about those items, then I'm comfortable with status quo too.
And, just to follow up on that, like the crux of the issue as described in the policy is what's cause for the moderator stopping the speaker? Paul, as you, or maybe it was Deb, described it, I think it was Deb, reminding the speaker about like, or reminding the speaker that, that the council would find more helpful that the comments not be um, you know threatening or harassing or raising or like with raised voice or things like that. A reminder is one thing, but this is really about like stopping somebody from speaking.
And I can stop people from speaking because according to our policy, they have 3 minutes. So I can say to them, according to our policy, thank you very much. Your 3 minutes is over.
And that I think was the issue in the Augusta School Board. It was the stopping.
Yeah. Are there any objections to us continuing with the procedure that we have now written down, understanding the caveats that we've talked about, uh, until the Attorney General's office comes up with a final recommendation? Okay, then I think we have consensus that we'll continue where we're at. Brendan, I really want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. Uh, and it's made me, you know, kind of prepare myself mentally for public comments that I might not agree with. And I think
Yeah.
we probably should all be prepared for that.
Yeah, court cases can be a slog to get through sometimes, but I also find that, at least from my perspective, they're, great discussions of sort of the core principles of, our Constitution. So.
Thank you very much. So the next thing
Paul,
I'd like to talk about is the orientation. And the plan is, this was, we talked about it at the MRC meeting and everyone seemed in agreement with it. This would be starting in August. And I'll be speaking on the history of the overdose crisis from the medical standpoint. And Tess will be talking about how crisis has affected the people in community. I've started getting my resources for that talk, and oh my gosh, it brings back memories. Tess, I'm sure you're feeling the same way. Brendan, you weren't at the meeting, but what we did was took a lot of the things that you were assigned to, or that we had thought that you would speak on, and we just put them all together onto in one number. Does that look okay to you?
Uh, I will make anything work. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do all that, and it'd just be useful to know how much time I would have.
hmm Um, yeah, we haven't really placed a time on it. Brendan, what we're planning on doing is using about a half an hour of the meeting in August and September and maybe October to go through this. Um, so I would say that you probably have about 20 minutes or so.
Out of the full half hour.
Yeah. Do you
Um,
think you can get through? And what I'm looking for is not really anything in depth because
right.
people can get in-depth information by reading the MOU.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
by and but just kind of an overview.
Yeah, I think I can probably do that in 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay. And I would plan to spend about 10 minutes on my part. Tess, how long do you think you would take?
Um, I can be flexible with whatever time frame.
Okay. Well, hopefully in August we can get through numbers 1 and 2. Would you be ready for that, Tess?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
Brendan, would you think you'd be ready for that?
Um, because I missed the last meeting, can you just remind me what's happening in August?
Sure. Elizabeth, I don't know, could you share that? Uh,
Or, and if this is better done off the call, I'm happy to talk to Elizabeth.
no, I think we should do it on the call so that good. So scrolling down number 2
Oh, I
is
see.
the MOU, the structure of the settlement funds over the time span of the settlement, and how the funds are distributed in Maine.
Got it.
Well, can I make a suggestion?
Yes, absolutely.
So you have 8 sections here.
Yep. Actually 7, but yep.
Okay, 7. What I would do if you're taking a half an hour, and if this whole thing is intended to be about an hour long when it's actually put together, I would take probably at least up to number 3, if not 4, and try to make it in that half hour and
Okay.
do that. I mean, I would try to pull that down if the intent is that this be an hour orientation and that we're going to do practice runs with actual council members, then I would try to stick with the time frame of saying, if this was an hour long and you had 7 or 8 of them, I would take in that first half hour 4.
Okay.
But that's
I
just a
think
suggestion. Others may feel differently.
that does make sense. And we would keep it as more, like I said, like an overview, not real go into real specifics. I think I could I think I could decrease mine, easily to 5 minutes and still get the point across.
Yeah, from my point of view, I would be happy to, cede any of my time to the first category. It seems like, Paul and Tess's segments, are pretty important.
Mhm.
I can adapt to, however much time, would be appropriate in category 1.
Okay. Chastity?
So for each person's section, is everyone developing like slides or anything for this, or is it just straight talking?
That's a really good question. I think everyone's going to do it differently. I'm going to make a few slides because I think it will, I can, um, I can get my point across better using slides. Um, Tess, what are your thoughts?
Slides usually help me.
Okay.
I guess it really depends on the amount of time that we each have. Because, I mean, the part that I'm doing around how the crisis affected people and community, that could be an hour worth of material. It could be the impacts are so far reaching.
Yeah.
And that time period will be really helpful.
Oh, sorry, Chastity, I'm interrupting your session.
No, you're not. My thing just never lowered, so you're good.
Could someone elaborate or describe a little bit more what 2B is about, or what are you looking for on that?
Just how the amount of money coming into Maine is kind of front loaded
Oh, I see.
and
Okay.
decreases over the time span of the settlement.
Mm-hmm.
I think also in there, Brendan, you would put in there that how the money, some of it goes to the council, the percentage that goes to the AG's office, the percentage that goes to the municipalities, those kinds of things would be, a lot of people don't understand that. But you have plenty of slides that you used in the beginning that just simply shared how that structure and percentage worked out.
Yep.
Yep.
One thing that I think would be helpful, um, and may warrant, a little extra time on in my section, and it's fine if it's somebody else's, but maybe after C, a discussion of the approved uses.
Hmm.
Um, and it's not to take away from Chastity's discussion in 6. It's perhaps more to set it up a little bit. But essentially to, discuss or focus on the restrictions on the funds.
Yeah, I think that would be fine if you talked about that. I think that would be important, actually.
So I would give it its own subcategory of the, approved uses.
Okay. So D. And approved uses. Okay. Okay, so what we'll try to do in August is go from 1 through 4. And then uh we can get feedback from other council members and the public on whether that was helpful or not.
And one other suggestion I would make is, either in category 3 or I think it's more appropriate in category 3, but so you may want it somewhere else. As part of Pat's discussion of the structure of the Recovery Council, I would add a specific discussion of the conflicts of interest section of the bylaws. And especially we'll have already gone over the appointments of the council and, the categories of populations or individuals or, training that the appointments require. But there, the fact that Maine's a small state, anybody who's involved in opioid abatement, would both be valuable here, but also run into conflicts.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan. I agree. Any other comments on this? I'm looking forward to giving this a try. And okay, you can stop sharing that if you want now, Elizabeth. So that's really all I have on the agenda. Is there any, Carol isn't here on the meeting. Is there any other things that people want to discuss in this meeting?
Paul, I'd just flag maybe for next meeting. I was able to connect with Brendan about the employee components and get some suggestions for that moving forward. I don't think it's as time sensitive now, given that we've approved the contracts and everything's going forward, but maybe you still would be useful for future iterations.
So talk about the contracts again, talk about
The
the kind of
process, yeah.
process. Okay, we'll put that on the agenda for next month. Oh, Elizabeth.
I think something related to our public comment may just be general meeting slash Zoom appropriate behavior. We've had a couple minor things in the past with, and I know, we hear about this happening globally, with the way people act in these meetings. And so just what is appropriate and then how we are able to respond to that. Just because I don't want to make sure that if we can't just kick people out of meetings. But if that's what we're allowed to do, I just want to make sure that we address those things, but also just making the standard. We know that people aren't allowed to participate, but also just spelling out what is appropriate for a meeting, I think may be helpful. But I think that might be, we all know how it's appropriate to behave, but can't help to put some guidance together.
And you're talking about that in the orientation?
I think maybe more along the lines of the public comment policy.
I see. Okay.
Just in, I don't think participants or attendees can chat, but, things like that, respectful language and, display names being appropriate and things of that nature. Just to, make sure people are being appropriate and respectful to each other and the community.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Chastity?
Yeah, she gets the display name part at the end. That's what I was coming in. So the issue for folks, I don't think everybody knows. A while ago, there was a point in time where someone on the public side, like they had their hand raised trying to get into the meeting. They had themselves named as Paul, even though Paul was in the meeting, like actively talking. So one, we knew it wasn't Paul. And they left and rejoined with like a super vulgar, inappropriate name that we wouldn't even be able to say. So ideally, I think if the council could come up with just guidance that when these things happen, we will just remove you from the webinar or whatever. And that could be linked right into the agenda as like the Zoom part about public participation.
Perhaps when we make changes, when the AG's office comes up with recommendations and we make a final change, we could add that some language regarding that in the policy for public comment.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's sort of a related but separate issue um, about like on, the public's ability to like, I would need to look in, forward, like unlike a public comment policy, the Recovery Council is required to have its meetings be public. Public means the public can attend. And I would want to look into what, what's the uh, boundaries of the Recovery Council's ability to remove people based on their behavior from a public meeting.
Brendan, even if it's not something like an inappropriate name, if they're trying to impersonate a council member, I think being clear about that
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, that's fair. And, many of you have more experience with public meetings than I do. And, to the extent any of you have encountered, that kind of situation about attendance in a public meeting, I'd certainly welcome your input.
And it's strange you don't think of things until they happen. I know that in a recent city council meeting, it wasn't recent, 3, 4 months ago, somebody was actually asked to leave a meeting during public comment because of threatening and disruptive behavior, and then went on Zoom under a false name. And so they had to address that whole issue. It was someone who was asked to leave because of verbally being threatening and yelling, and then they get on Zoom under a fictitious name and proceed to do the same thing. So, but we've been very fortunate. We don't have those kind of people visiting us at the moment. So
We have had that with the SUD learning community and some hecklers that were actually from out of state and not in state, and they were advocates for something different than what we were presenting, and it became a pattern and a problem. And there was impersonation, there was aggressive language, there was disrespect. It went on and on. So what we ended up doing was some disclaimer language. I'll have to go back and look to see what it is, but basically, if you are disruptive or whatever, there is some subjectivity to it, but the facilitator holds the right to excuse you from the meeting. It was very respectful, but it was also trying to set that limit and boundary. I can get you the language. I'm not sure if it will work for MRC because of the different governing rules and responsibilities, but I will dig that up for you.
I'm a little bit, I just have a question of what you're getting at with this. Do you think this should be a separate issue that we discuss, or is this part of our public comment period, policy? And I asked that of Chastity, Deborah, Pat, and Elizabeth.
I think it's part of public comment because
Okay.
you're inviting the public. You have a public speaking part where they actually speak, but you also allow the public to join in via Zoom, attend the meetings that way. And so I think you could add that just to the public speaking policy.
Okay. Okay. Is there any other discussion for the meeting today? All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for spending an hour with us. It's a gorgeous day out there, and I hope every one of you gets to enjoy some sunshine today.
Wear a jacket, though. It's chilly. Have a
Bye-bye
good
now.
weekend, everyone. Thank you.